Open that bag right now. The manager's voice cracked through the supermarket like a thunderclap, stopping conversations, freezing shopping carts, and pulling every pair of eyes toward a single child standing near the automatic doors. 9-year-old Malik Johnson stood motionless beneath the bright white lights, his fingers wrapped tightly around the straps of a worn navy blue backpack. For a moment, the entire store seemed to hold its breath. The soft hum of refrigerators, the distant beeping of checkout scanners, even the music drifting from overhead speakers suddenly felt far away. All Malik could hear was the pounding of his own heartbeat. "I didn't take anything," he said quietly. His voice was calm, but the words barely carried beyond the circle of people already gathering around him. The manager, Karen Whitmore, folded her arms across her chest. "Then you won't mind if we check." A murmur swept through the crowd. Someone pulled out a phone. Then another. Within seconds, tiny glowing screens were pointed in Malik's direction. He felt dozens of strangers studying him, judging him, deciding who he was before he had the chance to explain himself. Malik swallowed hard. Not because he was afraid of opening the bag. He knew exactly what was inside. 3 library books. A peanut butter sandwich he never finished at lunch. A notebook filled with sketches of homemade robots. And a small silver robot badge he had built from spare pieces he found in his apartment building's maintenance room. No, what worried him was the time. He glanced at the old digital watch on his wrist. The numbers made his stomach tighten. In less than 20 minutes, his little sister would be waiting for him at the community center 3 blocks away. Every Wednesday, he picked her up after school while their grandmother worked a late shift. She hated being the last child left waiting. Malik had promised he would never let that happen again. "Sir, step aside please," a security guard said politely, moving closer. Malik nodded without arguing. He shifted his backpack off one shoulder and held it carefully in front of him. The crowd pressed in a little tighter. Karen looked almost certain of herself. Too certain, as if the outcome had already been decided. Near the frozen food aisle, a tall man wearing a dark baseball cap paused beside a shopping cart. Unlike everyone else, he wasn't recording. He wasn't whispering. He simply watched. His expression revealed nothing. Nobody paid attention to him. Nobody knew he owned the entire supermarket chain. Malik slowly unzipped the backpack. The zipper sounded strangely loud in the silence. One by one, he revealed everything inside. The books, the notebook, the lunch container, the robot badge hanging from the zipper. A few people exchanged confused glances. Karen's confident smile flickered for the first time. Then an employee suddenly rushed toward them from the security office, breathing hard. "Karen," he said, "there's a problem with the camera footage." And just like that, the atmosphere in the store changed. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud. "There is a problem with the camera footage." The crowd immediately erupted into whispers. Some people leaned closer. Others raised their phones even higher, eager to capture whatever would happen next. Karen Whitmore's expression tightened. "What kind of problem?" she asked sharply. The employee shifted uneasily. "The camera covering aisle 7 is not working. The recording cuts out." A few shoppers exchanged knowing looks. Someone in the back muttered, "Well, that is convenient." Malik stood quietly beside the security guard. He felt dozens of eyes moving between him and Karen. Moments earlier, everyone had seemed certain he was guilty. Now uncertainty was beginning to spread through the store. It moved like a slow crack through ice. Karen straightened her posture. "That does not change anything," she said. The missing item disappeared from aisle 7. He was standing near aisle 7. "We all know what happened." Several people nodded. Others looked less convinced. Malik glanced again at his watch. 15 minutes. His chest tightened. His little sister, Ava, would already be gathering her backpack at the community center. Every Wednesday, she waited by the front doors because she liked seeing him arrive before anyone else. He could almost picture her sitting on the wooden bench near the entrance, swinging her feet and watching every passing car. "Can I go now?" Malik asked softly. Karen immediately shook her head. "Absolutely not." The employee from the security office cleared his throat. "Maybe we should review the other cameras." "There is no need," Karen replied. "We already know enough." The man in the baseball cap continued watching from across the store. He had not moved. His cart remained untouched beside the frozen food section. His eyes followed every detail, every reaction, every word. Yet nobody paid attention to him. A woman near the checkout lanes lowered her phone. "If the camera is down, Then how can anyone be sure? She asked. Karen looked irritated by the question. Because sometimes common sense is enough. The words seemed to strike Malik harder than the accusation itself. Common sense. He had heard adults use those words before, usually when they had already decided what they wanted to believe. He looked down at the robot badge hanging from his backpack. The small silver gears reflected the bright ceiling lights. His grandfather used to tell him something whenever they worked on projects together. Facts first, assumptions last. That rule had never failed them. Another employee suddenly emerged from the security office. This one looked more excited than worried. Wait, he called. There might be another angle. The crowd instantly grew quiet. What do you mean? Karen asked. The backup camera near the self-checkout lanes. It faces part of aisle 7. The image is not perfect, but it covers some of the area. A ripple moved through the shoppers. Hope, curiosity, anticipation. Karen's confidence seemed to dim ever so slightly. Malik noticed it immediately. The security guard noticed it too. Across the store, the man in the baseball cap finally pushed his cart forward a few feet. Not because he wanted groceries. Because he suddenly knew something important was about to happen. And for the first time since this ordeal began, Malik felt a tiny spark of confidence return. Because unlike assumptions, cameras tended to tell the truth. The crowd moved as one toward the security office at the back of the store. Shopping carts stood abandoned in aisles. Half-finished conversations disappeared. Even the cashiers seemed distracted as everyone waited to see what the backup camera would reveal. Malik followed quietly, keeping his backpack close to his side. The bright fluorescent lights reflected off the polished floor as he walked. Beside him, the security guard maintained a respectful distance. For the first time, he no longer looked suspicious. He looked uncertain. Inside the small security room, people squeezed into every available space. Others watched through the doorway. The monitor on the wall glowed blue as an employee searched through recordings. Karen Whitmore stood near the front, her arms crossed tightly. Her jaw remained tense. Find the footage, she said. Then we can end this. Malik glanced once more at his watch. 12 minutes. He imagined Ava sitting alone on the bench outside the community center. She always pretended she was brave, but he knew better. She would keep looking toward the parking lot, hoping to spot him. The thought made his stomach twist. Here it is, the employee finally said. Every voice disappeared. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of computers. The footage began playing. A grainy image of the checkout area appeared on the screen. Customers pushed carts. Employees stocked shelves. Nothing seemed unusual at first. Then Karen pointed. There. Several heads leaned forward. Malik appeared on the screen, walking near aisle 7. A few people immediately exchanged looks. Karen's confidence returned. Exactly what I told you. But Malik kept watching. His eyes narrowed slightly. Keep going, he said. The employee continued the recording. Seconds passed. Then something unexpected happened. On the screen, a small object slipped from a crowded shopping cart and landed near the bottom shelf. Most people would have walked past without noticing. Malik stopped. The video showed him crouching down. He picked up the item and examined it. The room grew completely still. Karen's expression shifted. Slowly, Malik placed the item back onto the shelf. Then he continued walking away. Nobody spoke. Nobody even seemed to breathe. Wait, the employee whispered. Look at the timestamp. He replayed the footage. Again, the same sequence appeared. Malik had not hidden anything. He had not placed anything into his backpack. He had simply returned a misplaced item. A woman near the doorway lowered her phone. He was helping, she said softly. Another shopper nodded. That is not what someone stealing would do. The whispers began again, but this time they sounded different. The judgment was gone. Doubt had changed direction. Karen stared at the monitor. Her confidence seemed to shrink with every passing second. Yet something still bothered Malik. He stepped closer to the screen. Go back, he said. A little farther. The employee rewound the footage several more seconds. A figure appeared briefly near the edge of the frame. Someone moving quickly away from aisle 7. The image was blurry. The face was impossible to identify. But Malik immediately noticed something else. His eyes locked onto the screen. That person, he said quietly. They are wearing the same red jacket I saw earlier. The room fell silent once again. Because suddenly, the story was no longer about Malik at all. The room seemed to shrink around the glowing monitor. Nobody looked at Malik anymore. Every eye was fixed on the blurry figure moving across the screen in a bright red jacket. The image lasted only a few seconds before disappearing beyond the camera's range, but it was enough to change everything. Karen Whitmore stepped closer to the monitor. "That could be anyone," she said quickly. Her voice sounded different now, less certain, less commanding. The employee replayed the footage. Again, the figure appeared. Again, the red jacket flashed across the screen before vanishing. Malik studied the image carefully. His grandfather always said that details mattered more than guesses. While everyone else focused on the jacket, Malik noticed something else. The person had a large white logo on the back of the sleeve. Not a common design. Not something easy to miss. "I saw that jacket earlier," Malik said. Several heads turned toward him. "Where?" asked the security guard. Malik thought for a moment. "Near the snack aisle. About 10 minutes before all this happened." The employee paused the video. "Can we zoom in?" After several seconds of clicking and adjusting, the image grew larger. It became grainy and distorted, but one thing was suddenly visible. The white logo. A curved shape that looked almost like a wave. A woman standing near the doorway gasped softly. "I know that logo." Everyone looked at her. "My son has the same jacket. It is from Westfield High School." The room erupted into murmurs. Westfield High sat less than 2 miles away. Students often stopped by after classes ended. Karen immediately shook her head. That does not prove anything. But the confidence behind her words continued to fade. Malik glanced at his watch again. 9 minutes. He imagined Ava checking the clock at the community center. She would still be waiting, still believing he would come. The thought made him anxious, but he remained focused. Something about the footage still felt incomplete. Across the room, the man in the baseball cap finally spoke for the first time. "Do you have cameras covering the entrance?" His voice was calm and measured. Several employees turned toward him. "Yes," one replied. "Good," the man said. "Then let us see who walked into the store wearing that jacket." The suggestion immediately changed the atmosphere. Suddenly, everyone wanted answers. The employee pulled up another recording. The entrance camera appeared on screen. Customers entered and exited beneath the sliding doors. The footage rolled backward through the afternoon. Minute after minute passed. Then the employee froze the frame. A teenager wearing the same red jacket stepped into view. The room fell silent. "There," the employee whispered. The teenager's face was partially visible. Not enough for a complete identification, but enough to recognize something else. Karen's expression changed instantly. Her face lost color. Her eyes widened. She looked away from the screen so quickly that several people noticed. The man in the baseball cap noticed too. And in that moment, he realized Karen knew far more than she was willing to admit. The silence inside the security office felt heavier than before. Nobody spoke for several seconds after the image froze on the screen. The teenager in the red jacket stood beneath the entrance camera, his face partially turned toward the checkout area. It was not a perfect shot, but it was clear enough to reveal his age, his clothing, and the fact that he had entered the store alone. Karen Whitmore stared at the monitor as if willing the image to disappear. Her hands tightened at her sides. The employee operating the computer glanced between Karen and the screen. "Do you recognize him?" he asked carefully. Karen answered too quickly. "No," the word came out sharp. "Defensive." Several people exchanged looks. The man in the baseball cap noticed it immediately. So did Malik. Something about Karen's reaction did not match the confidence she had shown earlier. When she believed Malik was responsible, she had spoken without hesitation. Now she seemed uncomfortable with every new piece of information. The employee replayed the footage. The teenager appeared again. This time, the camera caught a clearer angle of the side of his face before he walked deeper into the store. Karen looked away. "This proves nothing," she insisted. "A teenager entering a supermarket is not a crime." Nobody disagreed. But nobody seemed convinced either. The atmosphere had shifted completely. Earlier, suspicion had surrounded Malik. Now questions surrounded Karen. Malik checked his watch. 7 minutes. His heart sank. Ava would definitely be waiting by the front entrance by now. He pictured her small backpack resting beside her feet. He pictured her trying not to worry. A lump formed in his throat. He wanted to leave. He wanted this nightmare to end. But he also knew that walking away now would leave the truth unfinished. The security guard suddenly pointed toward the screen. "Wait." Everyone leaned closer. "Go forward about 30 seconds. The employee obeyed. The footage advanced. Customers moved through the entrance. Shopping carts rolled past. Then the teenager in the red jacket appeared again. This time he was not alone. A second figure stepped into frame beside him. The room became very quiet. Karen's shoulders stiffened instantly. "Pause it," the man in the baseball cap said. The image froze. The teenager stood next to a woman whose face was partially visible. Not enough for certainty, but enough for recognition. Several employees looked at Karen, then back at the screen, then back at Karen again. One employee swallowed nervously. "That looks familiar." Karen immediately shook her head. "You are imagining things." But her voice had lost all authority. The employee enlarged the image. Pixel by pixel, the photograph became clearer. A silver bracelet appeared on the woman's wrist. A distinctive bracelet decorated with small star-shaped charms. Several employees recognized it immediately, because Karen wore that bracelet almost every day. Nobody said a word. Nobody needed to. The realization spread across the room like a cold wind. The teenager had not entered alone. He had entered with someone Karen clearly knew. And judging by the fear suddenly appearing in her eyes, she knew exactly who he was. For a long moment, nobody moved. The enlarged image remained frozen on the monitor, glowing beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. The silver bracelet was impossible to ignore. Every employee in the room had seen Karen wear it countless times. It was part of her daily routine, as familiar as her store keys and name badge. Karen took a slow step backward. "This is ridiculous," she said. "A lot of people own bracelets like that." Her words sounded hollow even to herself. The employee operating the computer looked uncomfortable. "Maybe," he replied carefully, "but it does look very similar." The room filled with uneasy silence. Malik stood near the doorway, clutching the strap of his backpack. He could feel the atmosphere changing yet again. Earlier, people had looked at him with suspicion. Now they seemed unsure of everything they thought they knew. The man in the baseball cap folded his arms and continued watching. His expression remained calm, but his eyes missed nothing. "Keep going," he said. "Let the footage continue." The recording advanced. The teenager in the red jacket and the woman wearing the bracelet walked deeper into the store before separating. The woman moved toward the customer service area and disappeared from view. The teenager headed toward aisle 7. Several employees leaned closer to the screen. The footage was grainy, but one thing became obvious. The teenager seemed very familiar with the store layout. He moved confidently, without hesitation, as if he had visited many times before. Karen suddenly spoke. "This proves nothing. We still have not seen anyone take anything." Nobody responded. The employee continued playing the recording. Malik checked his watch again. 5 minutes. His chest tightened. Ava would be worried now. He imagined her standing beside the community center window, looking outside every few seconds. He hated the thought of disappointing her. But something told him the truth was only moments away. Then the footage revealed something unexpected. The teenager stopped near aisle 7 and looked around. Not nervously, not suspiciously, almost casually. A few seconds later, he picked up the missing item and slipped it beneath his jacket before walking away. The room froze. A collective gasp escaped from several shoppers still crowded near the doorway. One employee covered his mouth. Another simply stared at the screen in disbelief. Nobody could deny what they had just seen. The image was clear enough. The action was unmistakable. Malik felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. Relief because the truth had finally appeared. Sadness because so many people had been willing to assume the worst about him without evidence. Karen's face turned pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Then the employee paused the footage and zoomed in on the teenager's face. The room became silent once more. Because this time, everyone could recognize him. And judging by the look of shock spreading across Karen's face, she knew exactly what was coming next. The enlarged image remained frozen on the monitor, illuminating every face in the room with a pale blue glow. Nobody needed an explanation anymore. The teenager's face was visible enough for recognition. Several employees exchanged uneasy glances. One cashier lowered her eyes immediately. Another quietly stepped back from the doorway. The silence became almost unbearable. Karen Whitmore stared at the screen as though she had stopped breathing. "That is Tyler," one employee finally whispered. The name seemed to echo through the room. Tyler, Karen's 17-year-old nephew. A student at Westfield High School. Someone who visited the store often. Someone nearly every employee recognized. Karen shook her head. "No," she said quickly. The image is blurry, but her voice trembled. The certainty she had carried all afternoon was gone. The employee replayed the footage. Tyler appeared again. The red jacket, the white logo, the face, the movement. Every second made denial more difficult. A customer near the doorway folded her arms. That looks pretty clear to me. Others nodded quietly. Malik stood perfectly still. He felt no satisfaction, no victory, only exhaustion. The past hour seemed to weigh heavily on his shoulders. All he could think about was Ava waiting alone. He checked his watch. 3 minutes. The knot in his stomach tightened. Then something unexpected happened. The man in the baseball cap stepped closer to the monitor. For the first time, people moved aside to give him room. He studied the footage carefully before turning toward the employee. "Is there any recording after this?" he asked calmly. "Yes," the employee replied. "Several more minutes. Then keep playing." Nobody objected. The footage continued. Tyler moved through the store and disappeared around a corner. 30 seconds later, another camera picked him up near the customer service desk. The room watched in complete silence. Then Tyler approached Karen. The timestamp clearly showed it happened just minutes before Malik had been stopped near the exit. The two spoke briefly. No audio existed, but their interaction was obvious. Karen looked directly at Tyler. Tyler pointed toward aisle 7. Karen nodded. The room froze. One employee covered her mouth. Another stared at the screen in disbelief. Suddenly, the timeline made sense. Tyler had been seen with the item. Karen had spoken with him afterward. Yet somehow Malik had become the focus of suspicion. The realization settled over the room like a heavy fog. Karen looked as though she wanted to disappear. "There must be another explanation," she whispered. But nobody seemed willing to believe that anymore. The man in the baseball cap slowly removed his hat. Several employees immediately recognized him. Their eyes widened. One nearly dropped the clipboard he was holding. Because standing among them was not an ordinary shopper. It was William Carter, founder and owner of the entire supermarket chain. And judging by the look in his eyes, he had been paying attention to every single detail from the very beginning. The room seemed to stop breathing the moment William Carter removed his hat. Recognition swept through the employees like an electric current. Some straightened immediately. Others lowered their eyes. Karen Whitmore looked completely stunned. "Mr. Carter," one employee whispered. William nodded once, but never took his eyes off the monitor. The footage continued playing in silence behind him. Tyler's image remained frozen on the screen, standing beside Karen only minutes before Malik had been accused. The evidence no longer pointed in one direction. It pointed everywhere. William folded his arms and turned slowly toward Karen. "How long have you worked for this company?" he asked. Karen swallowed. 9 years. 9 years, William repeated quietly. "And during those 9 years, what was the most important rule we taught every manager?" Karen hesitated. "Treat every customer with respect." William nodded. "And investigate facts before making accusations." Nobody spoke. The words hung heavily in the room. Malik stood near the doorway, his backpack still over one shoulder. He felt strangely invisible now. For nearly an hour, everyone had focused on him. Now they were finally focusing on the choices that had led them there. William looked toward the monitor again. "What I see here is a child who returned an item to a shelf." He pointed toward Malik's image in the footage. "I see another person taking that item." Then he looked directly at Karen. "And I see a manager who never checked the evidence before publicly accusing someone." Karen's eyes filled with regret. "I thought," she began. William gently interrupted her. "That is the problem. You thought. You did not verify." The room remained silent. Several employees looked uncomfortable. Others appeared ashamed. The shoppers who had stayed to watch no longer seemed interested in recording videos. Many had lowered their phones entirely. A woman near the back quietly shook her head. "That boy kept telling the truth the whole time." Malik glanced at his watch again. He was officially late now. Ava would be worried. The thought pulled at his heart. William noticed the movement. "You keep checking the time," he said. Malik nodded. "My little sister is waiting for me." The answer changed the atmosphere instantly. Karen closed her eyes for a moment. The realization seemed to hit her harder than anything else. While everyone had been arguing, filming, and assuming, a child had been standing there worried about someone else. William looked at Malik carefully. "And yet you stayed." Malik shrugged. "Because if I left, people would think I was guilty." The simplicity of the answer left the room speechless. William smiled sadly. That should never have been your burden to carry. Then the employee at the computer spoke again. Mr. Carter, there is more footage. Everyone turned toward the screen. More? William asked. The employee nodded. A camera from customer service. It recorded what happened after Tyler spoke with Karen. The room immediately grew tense. Karen's face lost what little color remained. William looked at the monitor. Play it. The video began rolling forward, and within seconds, something appeared on the screen that nobody in the room had expected to see. The new footage flickered onto the screen, and every person in the room leaned forward. The customer service camera showed a clear view of the front counter. Tyler appeared first, still wearing the red jacket. Moments later, Karen stepped into frame. There was no audio, but the interaction was impossible to misunderstand. Tyler looked nervous. Karen looked concerned. Then Tyler reached into his jacket and removed the missing item. A gasp swept through the room. The truth was no longer hidden behind assumptions, blurry images, or missing angles. It was right there on the screen for everyone to see. Tyler handed the item to Karen. Karen looked around briefly before placing it behind the customer service counter. The recording continued. A minute later, Tyler walked away. Then Karen turned toward the sales floor. Less than 5 minutes after that, Malik appeared on a different camera. The timeline connected itself. The room fell silent. Nobody needed an explanation anymore. Karen lowered her head. Her shoulders sagged beneath the weight of what everyone had just witnessed. William Carter watched the screen for several seconds before finally speaking. So the item was already recovered. Karen nodded slowly. Yes. Her voice was barely above a whisper. And yet you still allowed a child to be publicly accused. Tears filled her eyes. I thought I could handle it quietly. I thought if I talked to Tyler later. She stopped. The words sounded empty now. William shook his head gently. When we stop following facts, we stop being fair. The statement echoed through the room. Malik looked down at the robot badge hanging from his backpack. The silver gears reflected the overhead lights. He thought about his grandfather's favorite lesson. Facts first, assumptions last. It turned out the old man had been right all along. Karen turned toward Malik. Her eyes were red with regret. I am sorry, she said. I should have listened. I should have checked the evidence first. You did not deserve any of this. Malik stood quietly for a moment. Then he nodded. Not because everything was fixed. Not because the past hour could be erased. But because holding on to anger would not help him get to Ava any faster. William smiled softly. You handled yourself with more maturity than many adults would have. Then he glanced at the notebook sticking out of Malik's backpack. And I hear you build robots. A faint smile appeared on Malik's face for the first time all day. I try. William reached into his pocket and handed him a business card. My foundation sponsors robotics programs for young inventors. I think you should visit. The room brightened instantly. Several employees smiled. Even some of the shoppers quietly applauded. Malik accepted the card carefully, as though it were something precious. Then he checked his watch one last time. William noticed and laughed softly. Go, he said. Your sister has waited long enough. Minutes later, Malik pushed through the front doors into the cool afternoon air. The sky glowed gold above the parking lot. He started running toward the community center, the business card safely tucked inside his notebook. Behind him, the store slowly returned to normal. But inside William's pocket remained a photograph he had quietly taken of the small robot badge hanging from Malik's backpack. Months later, that same badge would sit inside a glass display case at company headquarters beneath a simple plaque that read, Facts first, assumptions last.